Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
On?
What was that?
I said we're on?
We're on. I was thinking there for a second. I was concerned that I was going to have to do the show. You just quickly bolted out. It's like,
you know, I had some notes in the other room.
Okay.
In Cran, in response to our friend Parker Gabriel's question. I was doing some quick math. Illinois +9 for the opener.
See, you had the big, the energy of, that little 4-year-old who has to go run to a trash can to go throw up. I was kind of concerned
now I'm
for a
out of
second.
breath. Welcome to Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Again, it'd be fun to be at Zipline, TD Ameritrade, Game 3, CWS. I think Noah is floating by up there. Lots of rain. But on our mind is the Nebraska Athletic Director job search. Jamie Pollard. No, thank you. We'll hear from the Iowa State Athletic Director, courtesy of Heartland College Sports Podcast. That was posted, and you have Jamie Pollard saying thanks, but no thanks at this point. So we'll dive into that. We'll get the lowdown on Nebraska from Mr. College Football. It's a sweet sight when you go to newsstands and you see the Hail Varsity yearbook and Phil Steele. And you're just like, oh, yeah. It's said 60 days away from kickoff. Phil Steele will talk Big Ten West. We'll talk Nebraska. We'll talk Big Ten East. And we will get into what's Nebraska's win total per Phil and his research and his Nebraska bowling this postseason. Gary Barnett gives us the lowdown, what he knows about Jamie Pollard, not that it matters anymore, but also the fact that Ed Stewart's a name. So let's go down this rabbit hole for 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Numbers to get in, 466 3776 466 3776 800 825 5865. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, Chris Schmidt at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel, and can email Chris at hailvarsity.com. Well, let's just say this. Say you're Ronnie Green and you or your search firm have made overtures to Jamie Pollard. Let's just say for fun, Jamie Pollard maybe reached out to you. Let's just have some fun. Either way, right? You played that game. You're asking her out. You want to take her to dinner and a movie. Maybe ask her to prom. You want to see how it goes. And then things go horribly sideways. You have your choices. You have your names. There's the list. And right now, if you're Nebraska and your top choice is Jamie Pollard, you're now to choice number 2, or maybe Jamie Pollard was your second choice and Ed Stewart's your top choice. Either way you play this, Nebraska still is in search, right? So you don't have a yes, you don't have an agreement in principle, you can't move forward the rest of this week. Maybe we're all surprised and there's an announcement tomorrow or Friday. I doubt it. But the way, per the World Herald story with Ronnie Green sounded yesterday with Sam McEwen, it's going to go into July. So what does this mean for Nebraska? There's still really good candidates out there. But I think as folks listen to their friends around the world in the athletics department stratosphere, what are you hearing about Nebraska? What are you hearing about the football program? What are you hearing about this monster? You have a new facility that's going to go up that's funded and allegedly paid for. And I'm not saying it's not, but there's still some money to raise for that. But it's not all paid for. But you have a new facility that you don't have to do anything about except raise a few more dollars, which means some more millions of dollars. But a lot of the heavy lifting's done. You got a football program that needs to get in the positive category when it comes to win-losses, and this is a big year. And you got a basketball program that's climbing up. You got a great baseball program. You got an amazing volleyball program. And your predecessors have been fired, forced out, or forced into retirement. The last 4. Do you take this phone call? Sure. Do you listen to what they can pay you? Absolutely. Do you come take this gig? Nebraska thinks they're, I hate saying this because I love Nebraska. I went to the graduate and undergrad at Nebraska. You can reach out to some big time dogs, right? But Nebraska's just not that good looking anymore. Is it fair to say? I sound like Colin Cowherd. Slap me. Sorry. But you can reach for a Jamie Pollard who people are like, wow, impressed by. Because he's been there 16, 17 years. You can reach out to Ed Stewart. Ed Stewart can go, man, it's my alma mater. It'd be awesome. But if I kick it a little bit longer down in the Big 12, I'm probably the next commissioner. Why would I leave? They can take care of me and bump me up from if I'm making under $300,000. Stick and stay because Bowlesby won't go forever. So if let's just play along that your top 2 choices, either Pollard or Ed Stewart, and I'm not saying Ed's turned it down. I don't know. We know that Jamie Pollard's not interested in Nebraska. Flattered is the term he used. You'll hear in a minute.
And we also don't necessarily know, I mean, whether he's being 100% forthcoming in that interview. It is just a podcast. Like, why would you tell a podcast that you're about to leave Iowa State? You'd go about it in a different way. But from when you hear him talk, it does not sound like he is mincing his words. I'll say that.
No, he's pretty matter of fact with where the programs are at right now. So where are you going if you're Nebraska? If there's a no from Ed Stewart or a no from Jamie Pollard, do you go look at UNO? Do you talk John Cook into it? You let your search firm do their thing, yes. But you've got some pretty good internal candidates at Nebraska. You do. But this can't turn into you get turned down 45 times and it looks awful. as messy as the you're retiring today, Bill, looks, the fact that you've got nobody in the chair right now and you can't swing and miss too often. 3 strikes, you're out.
Yeah, how embarrassing would it be if you force out Bill Moose and then a month down the road you still don't have a guy?
Bill Moose is got a fan base beyond, football fans. It's called people that are in an athletic administration respect and love Bill Moose. And they've probably texted or reached out. Bill, what the hell happened? Well, I don't want to get into it. Well, word's out. Word's out that Bill Moose probably didn't go out on his own. And if you're a prospective next AD, that's a red flag. Mm-hmm. It's a red flag that Bill Moose made the biggest wow hires and had the shortest tenure of the past several athletic directors between Eichhorst, between T.O., Steve P. Bill Byrne did his decade and got out, and before that it was sweet old Bob. Let's hear the podcast part we want to check out. This is again Heartland College Sports. Pete Mundo and Jamie Pollard. Here we go.
Speaking of lists, Jamie, you just signed an extension there at Iowa State, but with the Nebraska AD opening, your name did come up in some places. What can you share about any conversation that did happen, any interest that was there? Was that ever a thing?
Nebraska is a great program, has a great history. I have a lot of admiration for Coach Osborne when both as a coach and when he was AD in the Big 12. And my daughter goes to Nebraska. I love the city of Lincoln, but I love working at Iowa State, and I am not leaving Iowa State. I'm here. We've worked really hard for 17 years to get this program in a spot. I'll take it as flattery and a huge compliment that there's folks in Nebraska that actually, there was a day 17 years ago that the thought that the Iowa State athletics director, that people in Nebraska would think that that's who they should go hire.
This is the last part of that conversation, and he's right. Think of his time. Think of what he's seen in Ames. That's Chizik, got hired away by Auburn, didn't do so well. It ain't 5 wins, I think. Then you go get Rhodes. Rhodes hires a really good offensive coordinator named Tom Herman, who Urban Meyer then plucks, and Rhodes' fortunes kind of hit their ceiling, and now you're in a convertible ceiling-wise with Coach Campbell, who's turned down the SEC, who's turned down the NFL, and if we can do it here, I can do what I'm doing here in most places. There's like some rarefied air, sure. That's the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Clemsons, the Bamas. Everyone else kind of all in the same boat, and I'm doing it in Ames, and my buyout's insane, and I've said no to the NFL as well. The last thought here from Pollard when it comes to comparing Nebraska and Iowa State, and I don't think he's wrong.
Because they, rightfully so, they didn't look at our two programs as being comparable. And I would argue right now our program is ahead of their program. Yeah. And so I'll take that as a huge compliment. But Jamie Pollard is a Cyclone, and I'm going to continue to be a Cyclone.
Third person. Jamie Pollard is a Cyclone, and I'm going to continue to be a Cyclone. There you have it. So arguably your top candidate or your second candidate, probably your top candidate, was on a podcast, and that does not sound at all, because you can read the transcript. You can read the Fan Nation posting with this story, and you got the full context, and they did a good job of reporting this, obviously. But he's not demeaning Nebraska. It's just like 17 years ago, it is a no-brainer to choose Nebraska over Iowa. Well, the last 17 years, we've detailed between coaching searches and ADs that have filled that chair, people aren't running to this gig, and that's too bad. It's not that it can't be awesome again, but you got to find the right guy and keep the right guy here.
Yeah, but one thing I took away from that is it sounds like, at least from the way he's putting this, that Nebraska did reach out. He says, I'm flattered, like they believe our programs are comparable right now. Like that sounds like he is saying that Nebraska did in fact reach out and engage his interest at least.
He said it without
more.
saying it.
Exactly. And then you go back to Ronnie Green's comments yesterday saying we haven't interviewed anybody. I mean, not entirely forthcoming. It's nice to hear an athletic director actually be forthcoming about what's going on.
Mitch Sherman yesterday was spot on with, why would you bounce if you're Jamie Pollard?
As an outside candidate, if you're looking at Nebraska as a place to go, I would not want to become the next guy in that vicious cycle. So I would think you would need some assurances to why it's going to be different this time. I don't honestly see it. I don't see it with Pollard.
Mitch nailed it. Dan tweets in, going third person, Jamie Pollard is a psycho, not cyclone. Well, there you go. So if you're Nebraska, Pollard is a great dude to go try and target. You can offer him more money. Now, the Iowa State powers that be will probably sweeten his deal from $700,000 or $800,000 to probably over $1 million, because he's been working on a bargain number for what he's done for a long time, and he'll get taken care of. And they are right now knocking on the door. They've got a chance to win the Big 12 this year. They have a chance to be considered, especially if they win against Iowa early in the non-conference, with that type of non-conference win against Power 5, that in-state civil war. They have a chance to be in playoff contention, and they have a chance to take down Oklahoma, who's many people's pick as the other playoff team, aside from Ohio State, aside from Clemson, aside from Alabama. So Iowa State's good. They've built up. They've recruited well, but above all, they've developed. And they've kept their stud young coach who motivates.
And I would think that he would stay until playoff expansion, because I think the best shot for Iowa State to make it in is through the expansion. If you can go 11-1 with a loss to a playoff Oklahoma team, you're in.
You're a second team in of that 12. Absolutely. You're knocking on that door. You're right there, and maybe you don't get in this year, but maybe you're not far off. But when's the right end? Right? When does Campbell eventually move on? Is the question. So we'll hear from Phil Steele. We'll dive into Nebraska, his take on year 4 of Scott Frost. What's he foresee with the Big Red? Who's going to the playoffs? As Phil Steele, his college football preview, it's reading for all of us along with the Hail Varsity yearbook. It's pretty awesome, but there's your info. There's the word from the man himself, Jamie Pollard, to Heartland College Sports Podcast. I'm a Cyclone. Period. End of discussion. There you go. So Nebraska, the search firm committee, the move is yours. And you've got people that are good just down on 10th and Vine. You do. You have people around Nebraska Athletic Administration that are good. And you got a former Husker in the Big 12 office that's really, really good. All right, Phil Steele's up next to Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy.
Back into it, it's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Let's talk college football. Let's talk college football preview. And we say hi to Phil Steele, back on the show again, at Phil Steele 042 is where you find him on Twitter, philsteele.com. And, of course, newsstands everywhere to get that college football 2021 preview. Phil, it's awesome to spend time with you again. How are you?
You know, I am doing great, Chris. So much better than last year at this time when we were wondering if we're even going to play football for the season. So it's a positive knowing that we got the schedules and we're playing football. One quick thing I want to point out to you is you mentioned the magazine's available everywhere. We did make a change this year. We're only at Barnes & Noble and Books A Million. So I want to save your listeners a little bit of gas money driving around looking for it. Only at Barnes & Noble and only at Books A Million this year. But I'm doing great. How about yourself, Chris?
You know, we're ready for some football in Lincoln. We're ready for football in Nebraska and ready for a winning season in Nebraska, Phil. As you look at Nebraska, let's start right there. And I know you go through every previous season. You put together what you put together and you've done for decades at the highest level. How did you even digest, process COVID 2020 when you looked at other teams, let alone Nebraska?
Well, you know, some teams you could look at it and it was basically normal for them, where if you played 11, 12 games, didn't lose a lot of players to COVID, but those were more the exception to the rule. We had teams that played, like Miami of Ohio, I think played 3 games last year, had 3 of their games canceled. Teams had their season canceled like the Big Ten did, then brought back, played a different schedule. The COVID testing would have teams shorthanded for some games. There were some mismatches where teams were down 30 players. So, I mean, you really had to look at it on an individual basis. All I could say, Chris, is thank goodness we played college football. Thank goodness we crowned champions in each conference and crowned a national champ at the end of the year.
When we start out nationally, and Nick Saban, I still see the smile on his face with what his team accomplished, how loaded they were, but just the investment they put in, the buy-in to kind of soldier through COVID, and they wound up on top. As we take a national look, Phil, who's on your radar before we get to some Big Ten action? Usual suspects, I assume, as far as some of the favorites, some of the teams that are supposed to be in the playoff again.
Yeah, I went way out on a limb here, Chris. I went with Alabama out of the SEC, Clemson out of the ACC, How about Ohio State out of the Big Ten? And then their shocker, Oklahoma out of the Big 12. But I think there were two teams that are right on the doorstep of getting in there that aren't your normal names. One would be Georgia. I think when you look at Georgia, they open up with Clemson in the opener. If they win that, they'll be favored in all the rest of their games. They've got a very good SEC schedule, only 3 SEC road games. They avoid Alabama, Texas A&M, and LSU out of the West. I think Georgia's got a chance to enter into the party this year. And then Texas A&M. And A&M was close last year. Remember Selection Sunday? Is it Ohio State? Is it Texas A&M? And Ohio State just barely beat them out. Talking to Coach Fisher, even though they lose 4 offensive linemen, he felt that last year, that this year's offensive line would be more athletic than last year's offensive line, and perhaps even better. And they lose their quarterback, but I think Haynes King can come in and do what Kellen Mond did last year, and they get that game against Alabama at home on October the 9th. So if anybody's going to knock Alabama out of the SEC and out of the playoffs, I think Texas A&M or Georgia are your 2 best threats.
They are on the doorstep. A&M's always had insane talent, but for whatever reason, they stubbed their toe, and this goes back to the Big 12 and obviously into the SEC. But now you got Jimbo, a championship-winning coach there, to pair with that talent. Big things could happen in College Station. I love your Georgia take, too, especially with the fact there's just 3 road games for them, and there's not a vicious crossover for them in the SEC West. Phil, let's look at Big Ten action, and let's focus in on Nebraska. What's your feel? What's your read here as we go into year 4 of the Frost era? A little bit of a shakeup you probably knew about, and that is no more Bill Moose here in Lincoln as the athletic director. That happened last Friday.
Yeah, and it's Nebraska's a tough team to gauge because it could go either way. You look at the talent they have coming back. They've got 17 returning starters. The one thing I'll mention is everybody's got 16, 17, 18 returning starters. You know, you look at the Pac-12, for example. Colorado has 16 returning starters this year. You think, wow, that's probably second or third best in the conference. It's actually second worst in the conference. So everybody's got 16, 17, 18 starters back. When I look at Nebraska, I see this is clearly Scott Frost's most talented team. They've got to get Adrian Martinez to play like he did a couple of years ago, rather than what we've seen the last couple of years. A little concerned about the backup spot, losing Luke McCaffrey to Louisville and now to Rice, which, by the way, we captured in the magazine. We've got him as a starting quarterback at Rice this year. I think everybody else has him as a backup quarterback at Louisville. But the talent's there throughout. Nebraska's got a lot of positions that rank in my upper units, but the big question mark would have to be the schedule. And, you're going to be clearly an underdog when it comes to Oklahoma. By the way, love to see that rivalry renewed. I remember back in the 70s when they played the Irresistible Force versus a movable object. It was the game of all time. Johnny Rodgers with those punt return touchdown, just a great game. So I'm glad to see that rivalry renewed there. But other games that probably be an underdog in this year might be at Minnesota, Ohio State at home, at Wisconsin, even Iowa at home. And then there's toss-up games on the schedule. I think that traveling to Michigan State and Illinois, not going to be easy. Northwestern at home, not easy. Michigan at home, not easy. So there's a lot of games where they've been losing close games in the last couple of years. If they continue to lose close games, it's going to be a disappointing season. But if they can break through and start playing with some confidence, they can actually get to the plus side of the ledger. So it's one of those teams that I can see going either way this year.
Phil Steele's with us, Hail Varsity Radio College Football Preview. Can log on philsteele.com or head to Barnes & Noble and get your college football Bible for 2021. That's the story of a lot of Big Ten teams, Phil, is how are you in one possession games? How are your special teams units? And the thing that's just crushed Nebraska even before Frost and for years now has been the turnover bug. And is that a number as you do research and look at some of the data, the Nebraska turnover margin, does that jump out to you?
You know what? And this year, though, it jumps out to me in a positive way because last year they were minus 11 turnovers in a shortened season. And I won't get into too many specifics, but I did a little formula, and because the turnover equals turnaround is generally based on a 12-game season. But in this case, if you had 8 minus 8 in turnovers, you qualified for it, because if you only played 7 games, the amount of turnovers per game, et cetera. But anyway, Nebraska qualified for turnovers equals turnaround regardless. They had minus 11 turnovers last year. And what that says is generally teams that had negative double-digit turnovers one year have a better record the next year. And if you go back and look at Nebraska in the past, let's just say in the last 7 years, only once has Nebraska had double-digit turnovers, and that was back in 2015 when they were minus 12 in turnovers. And that year they went 6-7. Well, the next year they rebounded in 2016, went all the way up to 9-4. Why? Because the turnovers, which are somewhat of a luck thing, not necessarily, but it is a little bit of a luck factor. It switched the other way. And that was the first article I wrote for the magazine back 27 years ago. It's proven to be about a 75% success rate every single year. So Nebraska's got that working for them this year, the fact that they were minus 11 turnovers last year.
Phil Steele's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Question mark for you with Nebraska here, schedule-wise, and you mentioned a lot of the coin flip games. Is there a barometer game for you on Nebraska's schedule, or is there, okay, they win this game, maybe it could flip the season?
I am going to say they need to win early. Nebraska has to get to that midpoint of the season. I'll use Michigan as your big game, I think. Okay. I think they need to beat Michigan at home. If they do, it could be a big thing. If at that point Nebraska gets to maybe 4-2 or 5-1, which is definitely a potential, then everything looks good. But you look at those final 5 games, they figure to be an underdog in 4 of the last 5 games. You know, Ohio State, Wisconsin, and Iowa are 3 powers in the Big Ten this year, and Minnesota's got to be played on the road. So as opposed to one specific game, I think let's just go ahead and use a litmus test and say if it's 3-3 at midseason, it's probably not going to turn out to be good. We need to have a winning record at midseason this year.
Phil, when you look at the rest of the West here, let's talk Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Northwestern. I'm interested to see, if Purdue bounces back. They've got some offensive talent with Bell, obviously, and Bielema's back in the Big Ten. That's a monster opener for Nebraska at Illinois. It's a game they should win. I don't know that they will, but those teams that have been jockeying for that West Division, it's been Wisconsin's or it's been Northwestern's, but you've had good years from Minnesota. And Iowa's been really talented as well. From a pecking order standpoint, who edges out as your West favorite?
Well, I'm going to go, and first of all, I think that the West is very deep. Let me go to the bottom of it for starters and take a look at Illinois. You mentioned Bielema's coming in. When is Brett Bielema at his best? When he's got a big veteran offensive line. I remember talking to Coach Lovie Smith last year going over the offensive line, and he said, Phil, we've got 5 NFL guys on the offensive line. And then I asked Coach Bielema this year. I said, you know what? Coach Smith felt you had 5 NFL guys on the offensive line. How do you feel? He's like, Phil, I think we have 5 NFL guys on the offensive line. And so if you've got 5 NFL guys on your offensive line, you're in good shape because they're all back this year, basically. They get the veteran quarterback and Brandon Peters. That just shows you the depth of the West, because I picked them last. But as you touched on, that's a dangerous game in the opener. But for my number 1 pick in the West this year, I'm on with Wisconsin, and I feel pretty good about that. I think Wisconsin I rate as my number 2 surprise team in the country. A surprise team is a non-top 10 team that I think can contend for a playoff spot. And Wisconsin has 17 returning starters coming back. Now, Nebraska didn't get to play Wisconsin last year, but if you watch any Wisconsin games, they didn't run the football like they normally do. They only averaged, as a team, 3.9 yards per carry last year, which is definitely not your typical 5 or 6 yards per carry. They've got a veteran offensive line coming back. They've got what I call 4 VHT running backs this year, led by Jalen Berger, who emerged at the end of last season. I think the run game's gets back to normal for Wisconsin. They've got Graham Mertz at quarterback. He had 20 of 21 in the opener last year and then sort of tallied off. I think he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And defensively, they've got practically the whole unit back, including my number 6 linebackers in the country and number 10 DBs. And then you look at their schedule. Their road games are against Minnesota, Rutgers, Purdue, and Illinois. All 4 winnable. They play Notre Dame and Chicago, but I think this team has got a chance of potentially even running the table this year. And if they make it to the Big Ten title game, Chris, they've given Ohio State a battle in each of the last 2 Big Ten title games, so they're my number 2 surprise team in the country.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Phil Steele's with us. A few more minutes. Hail Varsity Radio, the Phil Steele College Football Preview 2021. Get to a Barnes & Noble or log on philsteele.com and get your issue today. As we look at the East, who do you think challenges Ohio State? And let me follow that up with, does Indiana drop off or do they continue that ascent? Because, man, they were fun last year.
Oh, they sure were a lot of fun. I don't know if anybody's going to really challenge Ohio State this year because they get Penn State at home in a big game, and I still think they've got a slight edge on Indiana talent-wise, or a decent edge there. But I've got Penn State coming in second in the East. They are my number 1 most improved team in the country. And keep in mind, they were number 7 in the AP poll at the start of last year. Lost their first 5 games, but it wasn't because they were getting outplayed at the line of scrimmage. You go back to that Indiana game that Penn State lost last year, they had a 488 to 211 yard edge. Now, how many games do you lose where you've got that massive of a yardage edge? But Indiana let their running back score a touchdown. They got the 2-point conversion controversial at the end, and they lost. I think Penn State gets back to close to double-digit wins, if not double-digit wins this year, coming off a losing season. But Tom Allen's doing a fantastic job at Indiana, and this might be his best team yet. He needs to keep his quarterback healthy, and that's Michael Penix Jr. If Michael Penix Jr. is healthy, they've got the running backs, they've got the receivers, DJ Matthews, Freifogel, Miles Marshall, Peyton Hendershot. It's one of the better receiving groups in the entire country. The defense, Tom Allen knows defense. He's got my number 5 set of linebackers with Micah McFadden, Marcelio Ball-McCray, who missed last year with injury, Cam Jones, and then in the secondary, I rate them number 7 in the country, led by a couple of All-American candidates in T.Y. Mullen and Devon Matthews. So this is a very talented Indiana team that I've actually pegged ahead of Michigan this year, and I think that they're a challenger for that number 2 spot in the East.
That back 7 sounds dynamite for Indiana. I know it's a little bit tougher schedule for them this year, but they've got a lot back, and Tom Allen, man, those kids love him, and they play well. I'll be anxious to talk with him at Big Ten Media Days coming up. Phil Steele's with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Phil, as we say goodbye, give me a surprise team, not necessarily who you laid out there with Georgia or A&M, but who's a team that could wow? Who's a team that can kind of maybe come off the, onto the radar from off of the radar that might make some heads turn nationally this year?
Yeah, and like I said, Wisconsin's my number 2 surprise team, or a non-top 10 team that I think can contend for a playoff spot. But my number 1 surprise team would really surprise you. It's Washington Huskies.
Oh.
And no one's talking about Washington. They'll be picked second in their own division in the Pac-12 this year. But here's what I like about them. A big, beefy veteran offensive line, a loaded stable of running backs. They've got Cade Otton at tight end. They've got a veteran quarterback now in Dylan Morris. And defensively, Jimmy Lake knows defense, and they got a ton of talent back. Then you got to like the schedule. They do play Michigan on the road, but I've actually got them favored in that game, even though they're a slight underdog in Vegas right now. But they avoid USC and Utah out of the South. They get Arizona State, the next best team in the South, at home. They get Oregon at home this year. I think they could be favored in all 12 games. And back in 2016, they were my number 1 surprise team, and we're not in the top 10, but then all of a sudden at the end of the year, they actually made the playoff. I think they've got that shot again this year, and let's face it, if a Pac-12 team runs the playoff, the committee has got to put them into the playoffs at the end of the year. Phil,
yay or nay, does Nebraska get to a bowl game this year?
Yeah, I am. I'm a coin flip there, Chris. If they are 4-2 at midseason, yes. Okay. How's that?
Phil, it's awesome to get caught up. We'll chat again soon, and thanks for giving us a few minutes with Hail Varsity.
Chris, I always enjoy talking football with you, my friend. You know that. So thanks for having me on.
Good stuff from Phil Steele. Coin flip is the word on Nebraska for a bowl game. There's no coin flip when it comes to working on your short game or putting. We say hi to Mike Schuhart, Wilderness Ridge Golf. Shuey, we just got a boatload of college football preview. How you feeling, man?
I feel okay. It's early. A lot of things can change.
Yeah. And we'll get to golf in 2 seconds. What's your take on the whole athletic director search and the retirement of Moose today?
That was quite, I guess, shocking. I don't think anybody expected that. I know I didn't. Mm-hmm. I thought he was kind of in to ride it out, especially kind of thinking where his programs are. I mean, It looks like football's on an uptick. Basketball's on an uptick. Baseball had a great season. So I think programs look like they were trending in the right direction. So it's kind of surprising that maybe he wouldn't see it through to the end. But maybe he also felt like, you know what, he feels pretty comfortable where they're at. It was time for him to move on because he feels comfortable with who's in place, where things are going, and facilities being built. So I don't know. It's a tough one to tell.
Have you sent in your resume yet?
I have not. I don't know if I would have the right demeanor for that job. It wouldn't last very long.
Shuey, I think your demeanor would surprise in a good way.
I don't know. I might go off a little too easy.
That's pretty good. Mike Schuart's with us. Shuey, what's going on at Wilderness, man? What's happening for the 4th?
We have 4th. We're going to do a shotgun start for our members in the morning. So everybody get on the golf course, enjoy a great day, great round of golf, and then be done in time to go do some of that fireworks stuff.
It's a way to do it. How them Divot Dogs doing this week?
Oh, man. We took on Hillcrest Hammerheads last week and crushed them. Wasn't even a match. We destroyed them. But we had fun. We got big week this next week. We got 2 matches. We have Country Club of Lincoln, and then we have Firethorn at the end of the week. So we got a Tuesday match and then a Friday match. So we had practice today, trying to get them ready for 2 big matches coming up. So we'll be fine.
That's awesome. Mike Schuart's with us, Wilderness Ridge Golf. Go see Shuey for lessons, fittings. Of course, Wilderness, a great spot to join and get that youth program going. Camps are underway or no doubt prevalent this summer. Shuey, when we had the news earlier today about Jamie Pollard being flattered about Nebraska but staying a Cyclone. We don't know officially. He didn't say he was offered. It sounded like he might have been on Nebraska's short list. I got about a minute and a half here. Do you anticipate Nebraska having a problem finding the next right guy?
I don't think so. I mean, I think if they do their due diligence, just some of the names that I've heard that would be very viable candidates, they'd be, I think, really good. Like an Ed Stewart's name that's being popped up out there. There's some other guys from around the country that have some great resumes. So, I don't know. It's Nebraska. Hard to turn Nebraska down. They still, even though we've struggled, Nebraska's still Nebraska. Man, they have a name. They have a following. It's a pretty good place to hang your hat. They have a lot of interest, a lot of support. So it's, if you're an athletic director trying to get things done, you have the support behind you to be able to do it. So, I think there'll be some people that are very interested in it.
Nebraska's got the checkbook as well. Shuey, about 20 seconds. When's the next fitting? When can folks come by and see you?
It's going to be after the 4th, so we're kind of got a lot of stuff going on the next couple of weeks, and then it'll be that Friday after that 4th weekend. Looks like we'll have some fittings coming online then.
Okay. Mike Schuart, go see him at Wilderness Ridge. Shuey, best to you and the Divot Dogs. Thanks for jumping in.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
There he is. Mike Schuart will wind down hour 1. Gary Barnett's coming up with Hail Varsity.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio lesson?
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Next hour, Gary Barnett, get his take on Jamie Pollard, Ed Stewart, where Nebraska's at. The Nebraska gig and NIL gets rolling tomorrow. Tip of the cap to you, Blake Lawrence, and Nebraska partnering with Open Doors and Runza, of course. So some reaction to that. More thoughts on Jamie Pollard's comments next hour with the Heartland College Sports Podcast. We had that audio for you earlier. May bring that back in hour 2. But Coach Barney with us here shortly. Reminder about West Blue Realty. They are phenomenal. They specialize in residential home sales in Lincoln and the surrounding community. Do you have a home that, listen, that price tag's not ever going to get any better than it sits right now? You know what the housing market's like. You know how much your home value's increased. Maybe the time is now to sell, or maybe it's time to keep looking. West Blue Realty, there for you. You mentioned Hale Varsity can get up to $1,000 on the closing of your next home purchase. 2 names to know, 2 names to love: Kelly Hofschneider and, of course, Tom Luby. Give Tom Luby a call today at 402-540-3768, or Kelly Hofschneider. Kelly can help you out as well at 402-202-2312. Can log on today, westbluerealty.com. Make an appointment. Go visit, stop by, and get the lay of the land from your friends at West Blue Realty, 1120 K Street, Suite 200. Okay, a lot laid out for you. Elijah, who would you, let's go back in time and say you ended up deciding to play college football. Who would you want to endorse? Who would you want to strike a deal with?
That's a good question.
Don't tell me you've never, thought about it.
Who Hot was up there.
You probably just wore them out.
Oh yeah, dude. They had I think they still have it. It was
all you can eat.
Yeah, all you can eat, and they had weekday lunch prices where if you went in weekdays at lunch, it was like $8.99 or something for all you could eat, dude. Oh man, that was.
See, I'm about the only one in my family that loves to go, and I just don't go by myself. My old neighbor Jolster would go with me. We've both since moved away. And no, that's a good call.
I wish that on the player introductions at Memorial Stadium, I wish instead of saying their hometown and their major, I wish they would say who their endorsement deals with.
They might start. You know what? I think there is not a chicken sandwich you wouldn't inhale from our friend Hooksy at Slim Chickens.
Oh yeah, Hooksy better be all over it. And then, but it's the additional factor of if it's Adrian Martinez, Slim Chickens, that advertising would be great, and I would appreciate hearing where all these guys are doing their advertising with.
Yeah, that'd be good, and we'll have a run on it. Now you've got TikTok and K-State making people dry heave. Let's get folks qualified right now. Let's get you a certificate for 5 shots with the Boy Scouts of America $1 Million Shootout. That's going on out at Highlands. That starts July 14th, and finals going to be held July 18th. More info at ESPNLincoln.com. We'll take caller 4 and caller 5. Caller 4, caller 5. Right now for the $1 Million Shootout with the Boy Scouts of America. Hey, hit that hole in one. You can take us to lunch wherever we want to go. 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865, the $1 Million Shootout with the Boy Scouts. Caller 4 and 5 right now. Gary Barnett's next on Hale Varsity.
Welcome to Hale Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hale Varsity and at Schmidt_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmidt.
Back into it, Hale Varsity Radio, Hour 2. Let's get caught up with the coach. Gary Barnett joins us, Colorado and Northwestern, of course, and stand out at Missouri. Coach, big weekend plans. Are you the host of the fireworks extravaganza in the neighborhood, or are you just going to someone's driveway?
I'm probably going to go over and watch it with my grandkids. They've got a big show out in Erie that's right across the field from them. So, yeah, no, I have not hosted fireworks ever, so it's not my bailiwick. And so we go watch them somewhere else because the kids like seeing them.
That's good. Now, of all the staffs you've either had or been a part of, was there a fireworks enthusiast you remember?
There really hasn't been that I can think of.
Like Mac never blew up a bunch of stuff, or
no, Mac didn't. No, I don't recall anybody on our staff being a fireworks guy. Yeah, we had fireworks every day in the office, I think. So we didn't need it externally.
I bet. Gary Barnett's with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, interested to get your read here on Nebraska's athletic director situation. It's just weird with Bill Moose wanting to be here through the end of his tenure, i.e., 2022, and that kind of being the feeling, and then all of a sudden, abruptly, you have a retirement today. Forced retirement is how it sounds, but it's the word retirement versus being let go. What did you think of Moose from afar? And overall, what's the picture of the Nebraska Athletic Director's job in college football, in your opinion?
Well, boy, that's multi-layered. Moose has always enjoyed, I think, a very fine reputation. Mm-hmm. He's been a football guy, and I think that's football people appreciate ADs that are football guys, and I think he's always carried that pretty well with him. At least that's been the impression. I don't know anything about what has happened and transpired at Nebraska. I can certainly see how trying to install and oversee this names, images, and likeness situation that's going to happen, trying to somehow do that, and then also wanting to step down in 22. It could be that whoever's going to do this needs to be on board from the start to the finish. And from the outside, you go, well, that's a possibility. I don't know. I have no idea. You know a lot more than I do about that, but I could certainly see where that could be something that somebody would want to do. It could also be that the guy you want to hire had other offers, and maybe they needed to move quickly if that's who they want to get. So it's who knows where it is. I think the AD spot at Nebraska I think all AD spots for the next 2 years are going to be really crazy, and just trying to negotiate and navigate this whole thing with names, images, and likenesses, not to even bring up the playoffs and how a 12-team playoff possibility and what that looks like, and that's probably the easiest part of the job in the next 2 years, rather than what this whole possibility of unionization, the challenges of trying to enforce any restrictions or rules that come about from the names, images, and likenesses legislation, either per state or nationally, should it occur. So it's a really complicated thing right now. Plus, you're taking over a program at Nebraska like everybody else that's in debt from the last year. Well, there's probably, I think the perception would be that maybe it's a little bit easier to glide through all that at Nebraska than some other places that could be strapped from a financial standpoint. It doesn't make any difference. It's still a debt, and somehow it's got to be paid off, and you've got to figure out how to slim things down at the same time, stay up and do all the things that a big-time football program and athletic department's going to need. So it looks like it's multi-layered and complicated to me.
Did you ever think about doing AD work?
There's two jobs I never want. One is being an athletic director, and the other is being a golf pro who has to teach people my age how to play golf. So those two look like thankless jobs to me.
Yeah, I exactly. The administrative side, totally could handle it, but do you want the the headache of it. And two names that are out there for this opening with Nebraska: Jamie Pollard, Iowa State. Earlier today, Jamie Pollard on a podcast saying, hey, he's flattered by Nebraska, but he's staying in Ames. He's been at Iowa State 16 years, and Iowa State's been really good. You've seen him with Matt Campbell, and even under Paul Rhodes. I mean, they were decent, But Jamie's had a couple of really good football hires. He's familiar with Fred Hoiberg. And I think his salary is somewhere between $750,000, maybe $900,000 if there's bonuses involved. Bill Moose made $1.15 million, was set to make $1.2. I don't know that Jamie Pollard would leave Ames, and I never thought I'd say that, but leave Ames for Lincoln, just because of all you laid out there. On top of, there's just kind of been constant drama with whoever's been in the athletic director chair at Nebraska. I mean, you've had a revolving door since Bill Byrne, quite honestly, left in the early 2000s. So what do you know about Pollard, and more of a wish than a reality for Nebraska fans, his name with the opening?
I've only had maybe one or two dealings with Jamie, so I don't really know Jamie, but you certainly look at the Iowa State, at least football program, and I think basketball program too to some extent. They certainly have been, on a steady uphill climb, not uphill climb, but improvement. Mm-hmm. And so that makes a guy like that's also regionally understands regional with the Nebraska, Iowa part of the country, understands, doing it. He's doing it at a place that has been very difficult to do it and make it work. A lot of it has to do with getting the right people in charge of your programs. And so I don't know much more than that about Jamie. I do know that he's been there for a while. Like you said, 16 years is a long time for an athletic director, that's for sure. But I think you've got to throw in Scott Frost's future into this whole thing. I don't know where that figures into the mix as to who you get, or whether that had something to do with Moose leaving. We're not going to know all this stuff till later, probably. But it sure makes for some good talk radio somewhere.
Well, exactly. We're hoping it's here, right? Gary Barnett's with us. That's the other thing here. If you're Scott Frost, how do you feel about this? How did you ever experience an AD change during your career at Colorado or Northwestern?
Oh, yeah, both places.
So did that make you nervous or not?
The guy that hired me at Northwestern was replaced, and fortunately, I had a little bit of input into that. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily who it was, but the kind of person it was. So, and they ended up hiring a guy that had a fire in his belly, and he was just the opposite of what they had. That's always generally what you end up with. And so I thought he did a really good job, especially. Right after he got there, he had a lot of challenges. And then at Colorado, Mike Bone came in, and as a football coach, here's what you know. New AD, probably new coach. So, when that happened, I could sort of see the handwriting on the wall.
Gary Barnett's with us, and that's the thought. The last name I'll throw out to you, and you may or may not have some contact, but Ed Stewart, great linebacker at Nebraska, has been the deputy commissioner of the Big 12 for a lot of years. Prior to that, was pretty high up in the Missouri athletic department, and I think he was there when Pinkel got brought in. So I think he had some input there. I don't know how much, but there's that tie, and that was really good football years for Missouri in the latter part of their Big 12 run, and then, of course, really great success in the SEC early on. What do you know about Ed from friends down in Columbia?
I don't know much. I know he worked for Mike Alden, and Mike Alden did a pretty good job. He was really sort of the Pinkel's guy, and Ed's a football guy, and he certainly checks that box. If you're a football coach looking to see who's going to get hired, you sort of want a guy who understands it, played the game, gets it, knows how important it is. So he certainly checks that box. I think being an assistant commissioner in the conference is that's also a plus. That's administrative work, having to balance teams and sports and all sorts of other things while also walking a line with the NCAA. So that's pretty important experience. Being a former Nebraska guy, I'm sure that's probably high on everybody's list. So, both of those, if those are the two candidates, at least on paper, and I can't go beyond that with either one of these guys, is at least on paper you got two good candidates.
Okay, so give me a name that you know of that's big time that you think could work at Nebraska that you know, or from the coaching fraternity that, hey, this would make sense just looking at the situation that maybe we're not thinking of. I mean, you know how things are in Nebraska. You have friends here where there's got to be some sort of Husker tie in some corners of the state for folks to want or accept this new AD. You've got Pollard, who's killed it when he's been doing his thing in Ames. And, John Cook's a name you hear, the volleyball coach here, who would be incredible, but I think he wants to go win another national championship and then enjoy the mountains. I mean, I think, we're looking at his age, and he's a young early to mid 60s, but who's out there, Coach, that could fit in Lincoln?
If you told me you were going to ask me this question, I could have done some research for you, Chris, but you caught me in an awkward spot. I have to think about that a little bit, and I don't think as fast as I used to. But
no, you're fine.
I don't think, first of all, I don't think you have to have a Nebraska person. I think that's something that people on the inside and from those states, I know here in Colorado, they always felt like they had to have a Colorado person. I don't think you necessarily do. I think you've got to have somebody who can, in this day and age, have a really good business sense, who understands how universities work, because navigating that landscape, admissions, and everything else, the NCAA, for whatever future the NCAA has, I think it's somebody who has experience in all that is really important, and a good business guy. When Colorado hired Rick George, he had been a former Colorado guy in that he'd worked for Mac, but he had worked in the PGA, he'd run the senior tour, he'd worked at he put together the tournament in New Orleans, which went from last to fourth, and money raising and attendance, and the non-big time tournaments, and then was vice president of the Texas Rangers. He had built buildings, so he'd been at Vanderbilt. So his experience like that was critical in him coming in and putting together a building that needed to be built. He understood football. And he'd been around many sports, and so someone like that is the ideal. I mean, Colorado couldn't have a better choice, and I don't think without question he's been the number one AD maybe ever here, and somebody like that. But also has a little bit of an affinity for where you are, so it's not a station for him, somewhere he's going to come and spend some time and then move on. So, right off the top of my head, I'll send you a list later on.
No, that's fine. And sorry about jumping the gun on you there, but I'm like, you know what? Let's get the Coach Barnett recommendation here. We'll have more with Gary Barnett, Coach. Will hang out another segment with us. We'll get into name, image, likeness, rubber stamped by the NCAA, and let's dial up. A cheese runza for you, a mushroom runza for you, a Italian runza for you. Maybe fire up the breakfast runza with those morning practices. I'm done tap dancing, forgive me. But a reminder about buckling up. 70% of people in fatal crashes in Nebraska not wearing a seatbelt. If used properly, a seatbelt can reduce the risk of fatal injury up to 60%. Your best defense in any crash. Buckling up, brought to you by the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. More from Gary Barnett. We'll check in with the coach on NIL on the way with Hail Varsity.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back in Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, talking name, image, and likeness. A few more minutes here with Coach Gary Barnett on Hail Varsity Radio. D-Day's tomorrow with it. And do you see any advantages for schools beyond the teams that are in the playoff right now? I think a USC, I think a Georgia Tech, just because Atlanta's a hub. I mean, it's kind of your capital of the South, so to speak. Nebraska and Oklahoma with the fandom that exists for both those programs. And I know there's pro sports in Oklahoma with the Thunder, but not pro football. And Nebraska is its own animal because this is the state's team, so to speak. So those are some teams I think can really hit a home run. Are you worried and concerned about this, or do you think it can be navigated forward to work out for everybody with name, image, and likeness?
Well, I think, Chris, because I'm not in it and I'm not going to be making decisions and I haven't done all the research, I'm scared to death of it. I think if I were in it, that I would be trying to figure out how to see light at the end of the tunnel and how to work it out, and that would be a different deal. I think any school that's got a rabid fan base has an advantage going into this, and I think the other thing is anybody that's in a major corporate area, and then you combine that with a rabid fan base, then you've got the right mix. I mean, you go to Chicago and you think what this will do for Northwestern student athletes and Notre Dame student athletes. You think of rabid fan bases, you think of a place like Nebraska. But you're right, Atlanta could be huge in this deal. I think LA, just because it's LA, I think Seattle.
Sure.
Any place that's got a large corporate community has got an advantage, I think. But that corporate community also needs to be tied into a rabid fan base. So any place in the South, any city in the South, then jumps out to you immediately.
Well, I'm wondering, is there anyone that can take advantage and become New York's team? Think of the East Coast, think of Madison Avenue, think of Times Square. There's not a lot of college football going on in New York. Penn State and Rutgers, the first run Schiano had was kind of adopted in that region. You also have Syracuse when they were on their A game with the McNabb years and a little bit in the late 80s. But can anyone take advantage of the East Coast? Or is it?
Well, I think more in basketball than football.
Good call.
And the place that jumps out to me is Austin, Texas.
Sure.
What's going to happen there, and Austin and Houston area, become huge. So maybe New Orleans, but not so. Yeah, maybe New Orleans, but not so much. But I think that from the basketball standpoint, the East Coast that'll be huge for those teams.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, have a great 4th with your fam and hit them far and straight, all right?
All right, Chris, thanks.
Gary Barnett with us, his take on NIL, and we'll go there here before we revisit the Pollard thanks but no thanks here, Jamie Pollard, Iowa State. So you have Runza stepping up here, local business like he talked about. And Nebraska is one of the schools that can and will crush it with NIL. They've embraced it. They've been proactive. They've got Blake Lawrence and Adi in their corner with open doors. So it's set up, and Nebraska's embraced this versus been resistant to it, right? This is how the lay of the land's going to be. So let's make some chicken salad here. If you're an old school, well, nothing should happen. It should be just books, tuition, and Be thankful you have a scholarship. That type of mindset, attitude, that's no longer prevalent in college football, or at least listened to. You can have the opinion, but it's not going to be followed. So you have a new normal, you have a new era. And Runs is like, all right, brother, and sisters, let's jump on here. The first 100 current athletes who opt in to promote the restaurant's rewards app to their followers on social media. It's the first company to offer athletes in the state an opportunity to be paid for their endorsement of the product on a broad scale. I'll be interested to know the pay scale on this for the athletes, because you've got massive followings for Adrian Martinez, for Cam Taylor-Britt, for the volleyball program, Husker baseball, but it's capped at 100, and it's open to everybody. You have talented softball players, Husker women's basketball, Husker basketball. So you've got a boatload of athletes, and you've got the first 100 here to promote. I about said pimp, to promote the app there.
I mean, you gotta wake up early, set those alarms early if you're a Husker athlete tomorrow.
Think about it when it's Temperature Tuesday. Are you going to do something as fun or as simple as the old to-go cup that has the almost your image, but it's got your shadow outline on it? Name the Husker Monday or something like that. Collect all of them.
I think you make the breakfast runs a finally, and then I think you name it after a Husker player.
Okay. And you get residuals even after college, or
I guess from Runs' perspective, that's probably a bad move.
do you do it? Think about back in the day, like as many. I mean, he had his own like Chipotle burrito named after him. Our old boy, Matt Slauson, Slaw Daddy. Mm-hmm. He would crush like a double that they would make into one, and it was the Slaw Daddy.
I believe it 100%. And you see Chipotle did that with like recently, like the some of the top draft prospects this year, where they just got their Chipotle orders and turned it in like their own. There's the Justin Fields burrito.
Here's what we got to do. We got to reach out to our boys at Lazari's, and they've got to get a pie named after somebody. A pizza.
Yeah. There's got to be like get Adrian's favorite toppings and make it the 2 a.m. pizza.
Something like that. Bang, there you go.
The 2 a.m. pizza?
The 2 a.m. pizza. Or you fire up our friends at Duffy's a fishbowl.
Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Right?
You got to find the player that's known for spending a late night at Duffy's. I'm not even gonna speculate here. I'm not gonna throw any names out there. But.
No, I know, but you know, you're gonna have your own happy hour deal at the bar.
Cam Jurgens could get a breed of cattle named after him.
He could. This is a Jurgens cut of beef.
Ooh.
Right?
Yeah.
So we're doing the work for everybody.
Get us in there. Open doors, hire us.
I am not smart enough to work with Blake or Audie. I'm sorry. But you might be. But this is cool. The payment's going to be a single flat amount for everyone, regardless of what sport they play. There's your equity. And I think that's the way to start out on it. And you can escalate or have a sliding pay scale. So there you go. And, you know, Runs has been around for forever. Pretty cool. 466-377-6800-825-5865. Numbers to get in. Where's Nebraska go for the athletic director opening? What's that timeline? Well, into July. That was laid out there by Chancellor Green. And you heard the comments earlier here on Hail Varsity from Jamie Pollard and the Heartland College Sports Podcast, where it was thanks but no thanks for the Nebraska opening, the flattery, but the reality of where Iowa State's at in football and where Nebraska's at in football.
We got a call in just now from Paul. He didn't want to go on the air, but he did want to say that he would do anything to get a Cam Jurgens center cut sirloin.
Okay.
Center cut. I like that. It's got the center.
Right. Center cut sirloin.
Much better than a tight end sirloin.
Well, dare I go tenderloin?
Oh, man.
Right? We can't. But I'm not. I'm going to be a snob for 2 seconds, and sirloin's good, but I'm going to spend more for something else, not sirloin. When it comes to steak,
I gotta think.
Go New York or filet.
Aside from center cut, like what football positions or sports references can you make with steaks?
Prime rib, something. I mean, get grilled. I don't know.
Grilled.
So this will be all right.
We're not the ad guys. We got to talk to Tim.
No, we gotta drink 17 or 18 old fashions and start being Don Draper and just spitting them out. So with Nebraska in this news, is this a punch in the face to Nebraska? I think it is, because I think Jamie Pollard's a guy that was on their want list, on their wish list, on their radar. So can you go get a yes, get an interview from an Ed Stewart? Do you check out Trev Alberts? Do you talk to John Cook? Do you talk John Cook into maybe thinking about this? But he's got a loaded team, and they want to go win another couple of titles. So can't do both.
And we haven't even talked about, could they promote Garrett Classy from interim to full-time if you reach the point where you're down to number 5, number 6 on your list? Is that the point where you'd get to where you start?
I have listen, Garrett's money, but I have a hard time believing that the guy that brought him in, Bill Moose, he's a Moose guy. Mm-hmm. So you can mind the shop as a Moose guy, but I don't know that you're seriously considered. Maybe you are. I don't know. But I don't think that he's full-time material because he's the interim. It can work out. Hank Bound's sitting right there for you.
Is Hank Bound still live locally? I don't think so.
He could.
He could sell the house up here.
He's a professor at Mississippi, Southern Mississippi or something like that.
Yeah, but once you come to God's country, you don't want to leave Nebraska, right? Right?
We will refrain from Nebraska versus Mississippi because we are cheering for Mississippi State tonight.
Hail State, go Dogs.
That's about right. We'll see if that happens tonight. It should.
Tall task, though, for them to go up against Kamara Rocker in the championship game. This is the benefit of Vandy not having to play that second game against NC State, because it would have been Rocker on the bump.
Andrew emails in, hell no on Alberts, whacked wrestling and football. We will leave out the name calling from Andrew. Chris at HailVarsity.com. Another guy to think about who's a pious grad is Cincinnati's athletic director. And dare I say, if a change is made, do you call Fickle? Who knows the Big Ten? Getting way ahead of ourselves. The Jock Doc's on the way.
And we're back.
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio lesson?
On Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Lincoln Orthopedic Center and Dr. Doug Toewes with us from Lincoln Orthopedic. Dr. Doug, happy 4th. How are you?
Doing good, Chris. You guys ready to blow off a few fireworks?
We're ready to win some baseball games, man.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what we'll worry about the fireworks afterwards, right? No ice cream or fireworks if we don't win.
There you go. That's good motivation.
Yeah. Well, tough news for Cleveland fans and a guy that's kind of been the heart and soul of the Tribes lineup, Josh Naylor, a guy that's all heart, all hustle. It's going to be missing from the Cleveland lineup for a while. Naylor going to need surgery. Broke his right ankle on Sunday in Minnesota. A frightening collision with the first baseman as they both converged on a pop fly. And Dr. Doug, this sounds horrific because he had to have an air cast. He had to be carted off. And it's no good here for a guy that is all about hustling.
Yeah, those are always scary plays, when a couple of guys are going after a ball like that. There's a lot of noise out there. People are calling each other off, and And, the collisions are always going to happen in baseball. There's no question about it. And unfortunately, Josh got a fracture dislocation, and that's always surgery kind of an event.
Take me through the next step here for Naylor and the medical treatment here. What happens with the surgery, the fix, and then the recovery?
Yeah, so with these kinds of injuries, it's kind of a twisting injury, and so one side of the ankle fails first, meaning one of the bones fails first, and then as the ankle keeps twisting, the ankle bone will dislocate, and then the other side of the bone or the ankle will fail. And so you've really got three problems to deal with. You've got a dislocation, and you've got fracture on either side of the ankle. And so the very first thing that happens is putting the dislocated ankle bone back into position. And that generally is done as quickly as possible. I will typically do that on the field if I'm in a situation like this. And the reason that I do is because it makes the pain so much better for people. If you just put the air cast on them as they're laying there, and you put this air cast on and you don't dislocate it, don't reduce the dislocation, they're still very, very painful. So it's a pretty easy thing to do to put it back in place. Then you put the air cast on to immobilize it. From a surgical perspective, sometimes as these injuries happen, there's some break in the skin, and that makes it a even more urgent scenario to go to surgery. But if there is no break in the skin, then it's something that can get fixed over the course of the next couple of days. Generally on the inner aspect of the ankle, the bump we call the medial malleolus, which is the bump on the inside of the ankle, when that breaks away, that usually means a couple of screws in that one. And then on the outside of the ankle, the lateral malleolus, that usually is a plate and screws. So the combination of those two things then creates the solid place for the ankle bone to sit again on the end of the leg bone. And that's what it really boils down to for fixing these things, is restoring the stability of that whole ankle construct.
Dr. Doug Toewes with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking ankle break and dislocation for Cleveland's Josh Naylor. Having a great season for Cleveland, but now having to recover. Let's talk recovery here and just the severity of this injury when it comes to getting back to 100%, or can you get back to something close with it?
Yeah, I think that anytime there's a fracture that goes into a joint like this, there's always going to be some longer-term issues that are going to develop. Because there's, by definition, there's damage to the cartilage in the joint as well with these kinds of injuries. So at some point in time, it's likely that he'll have some more problems. But in the short term, meaning the next 5 to 15 years, as an example, he very well could get back and be playing again in the outfield. It'll probably be a scenario where he's able to get running on the thing again in the order of 3 or 4 months down the line. One of the problems that he's going to deal with is persistent swelling and stiffness that goes along with that. Anytime that we see these kinds of injuries, we know there's going to be some longer-term swelling. So it'll be interesting to see next spring whether or not he's got the flexibility coming back in the ankle that'll be required for him to be able to, sprint hard and play the position and move around the bases, when he's batting.
When it comes to like remnants of this, you mentioned the flexibility, and you need that swelling and stiffness to be under control. Is it going to affect his stability in the outfield as far as being able to make a break on a ball? Will he be a half step slow ever because of this? And then also from a power standpoint, in the batter's box, either that back leg or that front foot, obviously when you're at the dish.
Yeah, so a good intuitive thought on the making the break on the ball. That's probably where you'll see it. Is just that first initial push off, kind of a step. You may even see him break on the ball really very differently, using his left side, as the initial push off. As far as the batting is concerned, I think once the everything is healed, he will feel stable relative to the ankle, and I think he'll be able to do the batting well. But again, coming out of the box and making his first move towards first base, you might see a step slower.
Dr. Doug Toewes with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Dr. Doug, is there a possibility for arthritis or just lingering pain, nerve issue with this?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was alluding to with the fact that it's a fracture that goes into the joint. When we have damage to cartilage, eventually we anticipate that leading to arthritic change, because arthritis is loss of cartilage that lines the end of the bone in a joint. And so that possibility certainly does exist. And the good news is that, I think that's going to be, quite a ways down the line. If he can regain his flexibility in the joint and is able to get that push off because of that flexibility, I think you'll see him play very, very well in the years to come.
Dr. Doug Toewes with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Ankle fracture and dislocation, our topic. Dr. Doug, have a great 4th. Thanks for spending time today.
You bet, Chris. You have a good week.
Good stuff from Dr. Doug. We'll have a little more here on Cincinnati's AD and Pius grad John Cunningham. We'll give you his rundown. That's a name to think about.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time on a Wednesday, Hail Varsity Radio. Great stuff from Gary Barnett. Fantastic work from Phil Steele on previewing the Big Ten. The podcast for Hail Varsity Radio, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. Be sure to hammer those and give us a ranking and rating, good, bad, or ugly. Give us a review. So do that. Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, Hail Varsity Radio. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Tomorrow it is the Elijah and Willie J show. Tomorrow and Friday, a much-deserved breather Saturday for the holiday. So no Hail Varsity weekend. And I'm going to be losing a golf ball tomorrow. Then it's state baseball Friday. And watching Junior do his thing Friday, Saturday, and hopefully into Sunday for state ball with the Lincoln A's. So the Journal-Star, Parker Gabriel, reporting and touching on the podcast revelation from Jamie Pollard that he's flattered by Nebraska, but not interested. You have former University of Systems President Hank Bounds telling the Journal-Star that he will not be a candidate for the job. So Hank's a dude that could rock it, but he's not a candidate. Jamie Pollard, not a guy. John Cunningham, pride of Pius. 05 Nebraska law graduate, 01 TCU graduate. And he's been around, man. Compliance at TCU, compliance at Maryland. Part of the coaching search at Minnesota that brought in PJ Fleck. And was pretty instrumental in attendance increases and fundraising between 16 and 19. So you've got that Jerry Kill, PJ Fleck mesh. And he's been at Cincinnati since 2019. Been part of Boise State as well.
So did he make the Fickle hire at Cincinnati, or did he come in right after that? When was Fickle hired?
Fickell's been there a while, right? 2017, something like that. So I think he inherited. But here's the thing. Fickell's still there, okay? Fickell's still there. So that's good. Either he's just holding his breath on Ohio State for Ryan Day to go to the NFL, or he's happy at Cincinnati and he likes his boss.
I mean, and
Fickell had to navigate a, dare I say, titanic 6-6 season for Ohio State that ended up 6-7 before Urban. Fickell was the buffer between Sweater Vest and Urban, if you remember back.
Oh yeah. Wasn't he at the helm whenever Nebraska had the
comeback?
Yeah.
The comeback.
Yeah, well, I guess it's really unimportant if he hired Fickell or not, because he's not coming in to hire a new football coach. But that is an important feather in the cap of an AD, is who he hired. And then someday down the road, it could be on him to make a big decision.
You got Fickell, you have Fleck, and Boise and TCU have been good programs.
I'm sensing a theme here with Fickell, Fleck, Frost. Am I reading too far into this? Is he just like coaches with F names? Is that what's going on here?
Something like that.
You heard it here first.
You guys behave, clean up your Funyuns and Cheetos. All right. Talk to you next week with Hail Varsity. Have a good one.